So I've been having a lot of mixed feelings about the importance of gear in creative endeavors. And there seems to be a sliding scale, right? And on one end is extreme detachment where gear doesn't matter at all. And on the other side is almost an obsession or glorification of gear where it's everything. And I've kind of slid between these two extremes a lot. And I think I'm here now. Gear is no substitute for the fundamentals. I think that much should be pretty obvious. It doesn't matter if you have the best cymbals, the most expensive computer, or the best turntable in the world. All the gear in the world needs a really strong base to be built off of, or it'll just crumble under any stringent examination. One of my favorite examples of this is one of my heroes, Mark Guiliana. He plays in such a deep, meaningful way, and it doesn't matter what kind of gear he's on. You know, he'll play on a jazz kit with a tiny bass drum, and then he'll also play with electronics, and then he'll play on strictly percussive instrument. But in each of these situations, he's expressing himself in a musical and coherent way. His essence comes through in that. In a way, his gear is his style. That's what he relies on. He doesn't rely on a particular cymbal to get the sound that he needs to, that is so core to his identity. I mean, it lends really well to the style of music that he plays, which is highly improvisational. He has enough faith in himself and his technique and his musicality to express himself in the best way possible, regardless of whatever happens or whatever the house kit is like. If it's a 24-inch bass drum or if it's an 18-inch bass drum, if there's toms or no toms. He's the sort of player who will play even if something goes wrong, because he will make the most musical decision in that moment. That's an argument as to why gear doesn't matter. But here's an example of a situation where gear really does undeniably matter. It can really matter when you're learning. Say you're learning 3D art. It can be really frustrating to feel stifled, creatively stifled by the gear that you have at your disposal. A really important factor for 3D artists that rely on GPU rendering is the amount of VRAM that their graphics card can have. And to explain that, but to keep it simple, basically in your scene, every time you add a new texture or you introduce some new geometry, it chips away at your VRAM. Cards might have anywhere from 1 gigabyte to 24 gigabytes of VRAM. But basically, once you go past that limit, you can't render your scene. You can't see the results of your work at all. It's not as simple as having a pencil and a piece of paper and making a mark on the paper. You immediately get to see the result of your stroke as to whether it was clean or not, or whatever you intended it to be or not. The advances in 3D art has made it so it's a lot easier and more accessible than it was previously, but it still requires a lot more patience than if you were a draftsman or even someone working in strictly 2D. When I started working with 3D, I did it all with my laptop, and I was lucky enough, I found out that my laptop had 4 gigabytes of VRAM, and that's not a lot, but that was enough for my work at the time. I made all the work in my reel, my first reel that got me my job, on that laptop. There's ways to be clever about it, getting different looks out of the same texture, and so on. There's lots of tricks that you can do. But as you move on and you want to make better quality pieces, especially if you want to make pieces that move, it would be a lot easier to upgrade, to buy, to splurge out that money to get the more expensive graphics card. The consumer level cards are from 4 to 8, and they can go all the way up to 24 or 48. And at that point, you won't have to worry as much about keeping an eye on the amount of VRAM that you've used. You won't have to rely on low quality textures. You can start to think more intuitively. You can create at the speed of your thought and of your own creativity, which is kind of the goal. The less barriers there are between your mind and you working creatively up here and whatever comes out of you, the better. The more quickly you can capture fleeting moments of inspiration. A really important point is the more often you can try, and the more often you try, the more you will find what you like and what you don't like and what works. The biggest factor determining how quickly someone gets better at what they do is how often they've tried. And sometimes gear does let you do that. Gear in this case lets you try more, fail more, and learn faster. A good reason to invest in new gear is to shorten that gap, the gap between whatever's going on up here and your output, whatever that might be. And for illustrators, that might mean investing in a Wacom tablet. For DJs, that might mean a better controller, newer software, plugins. For 3D artists, that might mean a new graphics card. Even in music, if you're hearing in your head a really specific sound, let's say you're a drummer and you're working really hard when you're playing to get a really specific sound out of your ride cymbal, it can be worth it to just spend the money on buying a quality cymbal that is closer to the sound that you want, so you can invest the rest of your energies into expressing yourself in that moment. For beginners, getting the exact same gear that your hero uses seems like a quick way to getting better. Everyone's fallen for that. You start down a new path of learning and you find art that you really like, and then you find the people who made them. And then the next step would be, oh, how did they make them? So then you get really invested in what brush does this person use, or what software did this person use. It almost acts as a substitute for a technique. It seems like it's technique you can buy, but really it makes up 1% of what makes an artist or a piece of art great. It's a very visible 1%, but instead you should be considering all the other stuff that constitutes an artist. The rest of it, the hidden stuff that you can't see, right? And that stuff is the hours that someone spends in a practice room every day, or hunched over a keyboard, or writing, or just sitting down with their thoughts and figuring out who they are. That's the stuff you should be interested in. That's the stuff you should be trying to study and learn and take. I get the fascination with gear. I love talking about gear, and it's a great way to get into a new field. But don't get stuck there, right? That's where amateurs live. Instead, retreat to your practice rooms or your writing rooms. Eventually, the gear that you need and the gear that suits you the best will find its way to you. You might hear it in a different context. You might hear someone else using it, or you might see an artist working with this and something about it just really resonates with you. But I believe that you will get there, so you shouldn't worry about it too much. You should keep your eyes and ears open, but you should also focus on what you have in this present moment. I'd say that basically the worst part about having crappy gear is that it can impede your learning, which it really does in certain fields. It's well worth spending money on new gear if you think you've outgrown what you currently have, and if you think the new stuff will let you express with more articulation and clarity. But you should try and fix everything else first before turning to new gear. Crappy gear also comes with limitations, and sometimes your limitations are what makes you and defines the kind of work that you make, and your gear can be that. Also, spending money on gear can motivate you to get better. It can motivate you to spend more time with your craft. I think it depends on your personality. I tend to do the opposite. When I'm diving into something new, I usually avoid buying anything new until I've almost proven to myself that I'm going to stick with it. For example, making these videos, I'm pretty much only using stuff that I already had. I'm using a microphone that's 10 or 11 years old, I think. I'm using a sock in lieu of a pop shield. I'm shooting this on a point and shoot that's technically my sister's. I did invest in a light, but that's because I wanted these videos to look like Sean Tucker's. And I'm very far from that, but it's closer to what I had in mind. And also, I wanted to get better at lighting stuff in real life because I thought that would inform my 3D work, my cinematography. I decided that if I end up sticking with these videos for a year, I'm going to invest in a new microphone. That's kind of a way that I'm motivating myself to carry on with these things. And it's like a little reward. And it's also proof to myself that I really do give a crap about these videos. This month has been pretty hectic. It's been one of the busiest months that I can remember. I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to make this video, so it's a bit more of a ramble than I would have liked, but I'm glad I sat down and I did anyway. The main thing is this project for my friend VOEL, and it's a big one. It's a visualizer for one of his upcoming pieces, and I love it, and I can't wait till it comes out. I think I'm supposed to deliver it on the end of this month, which is also when the video is coming out. So I assume that I've done it. So that's been super busy, as well as all of my usual work with graft. Anyway, I'm eager to be done with it and get back to my own learning and focus back on drawing again. And I've picked up Korean slowly, and I really want to tackle character design and ZBrush next. These are big plans. It's probably going to take me the whole year, but that's the general goal. I hope you have a good month and you remain focused on what matters to you.